tell us, where in the world are you watching from? Now, let's dive into today's story. Chapter 1. The Foundation. Marshall Ramsey stood in his study, examining the quarterly reports from his construction company. 20 years of backbreaking work had built Ramsey Construction into one of the most respected firms in Northern California. At 45, his hands still bore the calluses from his early days swinging hammers, though now those same hands signed million-dollar contracts. The military had taught him discipline, strategy, and most importantly, how to identify threats before they struck. 12 years as a Navy SEAL had honed instincts that served him well in business and life. His wife Tricia often joked that he approached their marriage like a military operation, always 3 steps ahead, always prepared. She had no idea how right she was. Marshall's phone buzzed with a text from his 12-year-old daughter Emma. "Dad, can you pick me up from Sarah's house?" Mom said she had to work late again. The 3rd time this week. Tricia's sudden dedication to her interior design career seemed to coincide with their daughter needing more rides, more help with homework, more of everything that Tricia used to handle effortlessly. As he drove through the affluent neighborhoods toward Emma's friend's house, Marshall reflected on his wife's recent changes. Tricia Carlson had been different when they met 15 years ago, ambitious but grounded, beautiful but not vain. She'd supported him through the grueling early years of building his business, even working as his bookkeeper when they couldn't afford proper staff. But success had changed her. The designer clothes, the expensive spa treatments, the constant need for validation from her wealthy friends. Marshall had provided everything she wanted, hoping it would bring back the woman he'd fallen in love with. Instead, it seemed to feed an insatiable hunger for more. Emma emerged from the house, her auburn hair catching the late afternoon sun. She had inherited her mother's beauty, but her father's steel-gray eyes and keen intelligence. At 12, she was already showing signs of a strategic thinking that ran in the Ramsey bloodline. "How was school, kiddo?" Marshall asked as she buckled her seatbelt. "Fine. Dad, can I ask you something?" "Always." Emma hesitated, unusually uncertain. "If someone was lying to you about something important, would you want to know?" Marshall's hands tightened imperceptibly on the steering wheel. "That depends on the situation. But generally, yes. Truth is always better than comfortable lies, even if it would hurt. Especially then, pain from truth heals. Pain from living a lie just festers." Emma nodded thoughtfully and stared out the window for the rest of the drive. That evening, Marshall returned home to find Tricia in the kitchen, phone pressed to her ear, speaking in hushed tones. She quickly ended the call when she saw him. "Who was that?" he asked casually. "Just Jackie from the design firm. We're working on the Henderson project." Marshall knew Jackie Wall personally. She was married to one of his subcontractors. Jackie was direct, practical, and had never spoken to Tricia in hushed tones about anything. "How's the project coming along?" "Oh, you know how it is. Demanding clients, tight deadlines." Tricia avoided his eyes, busying herself with dinner preparations. Marshall watched his wife move around their kitchen, the kitchen he'd renovated himself as a surprise for their 10th anniversary. Every detail had been perfect, from the custom cabinets to the imported Italian marble countertops. He wanted to give her something beautiful, something that would make her smile every time she walked into the room. Now, she couldn't even look at him. Over dinner, Emma chatted about school while Tricia picked at her food, checking her phone frequently. Marshall made mental notes of every tell, every micro-expression, every deviation from normal behavior. The way she touched her neck when Emma mentioned her college fund. The slight flush when the conversation turned to weekend plans. After Emma went to bed, Marshall found Tricia in their bedroom, applying an expensive night cream he didn't remember buying. "Trish, we need to talk about Emma's college fund." Her hand froze for just a moment before continuing its circular motions. "What about it?" "The quarterly statement came today. I'd like to review it with you." "Why?" "You've never been interested in the details before." "Because our daughter's future is important to me. I want to make sure we're on track." Tricia set down the cream and turned to face him. "Marshall, you worry too much. I handle all our financial planning. Trust me." "Trust." The word hung in the air between them like a challenge. "I do trust you," he said carefully. That's why I know you won't mind if we look at it together. Fine. Tomorrow. I'm tired tonight. As Tricia settled into bed beside him, Marshall stared at the ceiling, his mind racing. The college fund contained $180,000, money he'd been methodically contributing to since Emma was born. If something had happened to it, he needed to know. But more than that, he needed to know why the woman beside him felt like a stranger. Chapter 2. Cracks in the Facade. The next morning brought answers Marshall wished he'd never sought. The college fund account showed a balance of $23,000. Over the past 8 months, systematic withdrawals had drained nearly everything, all authorized by Tricia's electronic signature. Marshall sat in his truck outside the bank, staring at the printed statements. Each withdrawal was dated and timed. He cross-referenced them with his calendar, his travel schedule, Emma's activities. A pattern emerged that made his blood run cold. Every withdrawal coincided with days when he was out of town on business. Days when Tricia claimed to be working late. Days when Emma needed rides to friends' houses because Mom had appointments. His phone rang. Glenn McBride, his business partner and oldest friend. Marsh, you sitting down? What is it, Glenn? I just got a call from Alex Riley. You know him, right? That real estate agent Tricia's been working with on the Henderson project. Marshall's grip tightened on the phone. What about him? He wants to meet with you. Says it's about a business opportunity, but something feels off. Guy seemed nervous as hell. Alex Riley. Marshall knew the name, but had never met the man. Tricia had mentioned him several times over the past few months, always in the context of work, always casually, always with just a little too much enthusiasm in her voice. Set up the meeting, Marshall said. This afternoon, if possible. You sure? I got a weird vibe from this guy. I'm sure. Marshall spent the drive to his office planning his approach. In the military, intelligence gathering was about patience, observation, and letting the enemy reveal their weaknesses. Alex Riley was about to become an unwitting informant. The meeting took place at a downtown restaurant, neutral ground that Alex had suggested. Marshall arrived early, choosing a table that gave him clear sight lines and an unobstructed exit. Old habits died hard. Alex Riley was exactly what Marshall expected. Late 30s, perfectly styled hair, expensive suit that screamed successful but not quite wealthy. The kind of man who drove a leased BMW and lived in a trendy apartment he couldn't really afford. Mr. Ramsey, thanks for meeting with me. Alex's handshake was firm, but his palm was sweaty. I've heard great things about your company. From Tricia, a flicker of something, surprise, fear, crossed Alex's face. Among others, your reputation in the industry speaks for itself. They ordered drinks and made small talk about the local construction market. Alex was smooth, practiced, but Marshall detected the tells of a man under pressure. The way he touched his collar when lying. The slight delay before answering direct questions. The fake smile that never reached his eyes. So what's this business opportunity? Marshall asked. I have a client looking to develop a luxury housing project. 50 units, high-end finishes, beautiful location in the hills. The kind of project that could be very profitable for the right contractor. What's the budget? $12 million, give or take. Marshall leaned back in his chair. That's a significant project. Why not go with one of the bigger firms? Morrison Construction, Davies Brothers? The client specifically requested you. Said your attention to detail was exactly what they were looking for. And this client is... Alex hesitated. They prefer to remain anonymous until we have preliminary agreements in place. Marshall nodded as if this made perfect sense, while every instinct screamed that Alex was lying. No serious developer stayed anonymous at this stage. No real project worth $12 million started with vague meetings in restaurants. But he played along, asking technical questions, discussing timelines, watching Alex fumble through answers about engineering requirements and permit processes. The man knew just enough to sound credible to someone who didn't understand construction. I'll need to see the site, Marshall said finally. Of course. I can arrange that for early next week. As they prepared to leave, Marshall's phone buzzed with a text from Emma. Dad, Mom's working late again. Can you pick me up from Jessica's? Sorry, Marshall said to Alex. Parental duties call. No problem. I understand. Beautiful family, by the way. Trisha's show me pictures. The comment landed like a physical blow. Marshall kept his expression neutral, but inside, a cold fury began to build. She's shown you pictures? Just the one of your daughter's school play. Trisha was so proud. Said Emma wants to be an actress. Emma had never expressed any interest in acting. The school play Alex mentioned had been 2 years ago, and there was only one photo from that event, a picture that sat on Trisha's desk in their home office. Marshall drove toward Jessica's house, his mind racing. Alex Riley wasn't just some real estate agent Trisha worked with professionally. He'd been in their home. He'd seen personal photos. He knew details about their family that no business associate should know. Emma climbed into the truck with an unusually serious expression. Dad, we need to talk. What's wrong, kiddo? Remember what I asked yesterday? About whether you'd want to know if someone was lying to you. Marshall pulled over to the side of the road and turned to face his daughter. Emma, what's going on? She reached into her backpack and pulled out a small digital recorder, the kind she used for school projects. I've been recording things. Things I thought you should know about. What kind of things? Mom's phone calls. The ones she makes when she thinks I'm not listening. Emma's voice was steady, but her hands trembled slightly. Dad, she's been talking to a man named Alex. A lot. And it's not about work. Marshall felt the world shift beneath him. His 12-year-old daughter had been conducting surveillance on her own mother. Emma, why didn't you come to me sooner? I wasn't sure at first. I knew something was wrong, but I thought maybe I was imagining it. Then last week, I heard her tell him that she loved him. The words hit Marshall like a sniper's bullet, precise, devastating, final. But along with the pain came something else, pride. His daughter had the instincts of a natural intelligence operative. She'd identified a threat, gathered evidence, and reported her findings up the chain of command. Do you want to hear it? Emma asked quietly. Marshall looked at his daughter, really looked at her. She was 12 years old, but her eyes held an understanding far beyond her years. She'd already lost her innocence, already learned that the people you trust most could betray you without hesitation. Yes, he said. I want to hear it. Chapter 3. Intelligence Gathered. That evening, after Trisha left for another late client meeting, Marshall and Emma sat in his study with the door locked. The digital recorder sat on his desk like a piece of evidence in a court case. Emma had been methodical in her surveillance. Over 3 weeks, she'd recorded 17 phone conversations, 12 text message readings, and 4 in-person conversations she'd overheard from her bedroom. The first recording was devastating enough. Alex, I can't keep doing this. Marshall's getting suspicious. Baby, we talked about this. You said you were ready to leave him. I am, but it's complicated. There's Emma to think about and the business. The money will cover everything. We can start fresh in Colorado. I already found us a place. Marshall paused the recording. Colorado. Emma nodded grimly. There's more. The subsequent recordings painted a picture of systematic deception that went far beyond simple adultery. Trisha and Alex had been planning to drain the college fund completely, sell Emma's trust fund bonds, which required Marshall's signature, and disappear together. But the most damning recording came from just 3 days ago. Marshall will never sign the trust fund papers willingly. So we make him. You know his weaknesses. The man would do anything for Emma. What are you suggesting? Nothing dramatic. Just leverage. A little accident, maybe. Something that makes him realize how dangerous his line of work can be. Marshall stopped the recording, his hands clenched into fists. They weren't just planning to steal from him. They were discussing ways to threaten Emma's safety to manipulate him. Dad, Emma's voice was small. Are you okay? Marshall looked at his daughter, seeing not the child he'd been protecting, but a young woman who'd already proven herself more loyal and brave than her own mother. Emma, I need you to listen carefully. What you've done here, the recording, the investigation, it took real courage. But I need you to promise me something. Anything. From now on, this stays between us. No one else can know about these recordings. Not your mother, not your friends, nobody. Can you do that? Yes, sir. The military response came naturally to her, and Marshall felt a surge of pride mixed with sadness. His daughter shouldn't have to be a soldier in a war she didn't start. There's something else, Emma said hesitantly. I saw Mom packing a suitcase yesterday. She hid it in the back of her closet, behind her winter coats. Marshall's mind immediately shifted into tactical mode. Trisha was preparing to run, which meant the timeline had accelerated. Whatever they were planning, it was imminent. Emma, I need you to act completely normal around your mother. Can you do that? No matter what happens over the next few weeks, I need you to pretend everything is fine. What are you going to do? Marshall considered his words carefully. Emma deserved honesty, but she was still 12 years old. I'm going to handle this situation. But first, I need to make sure you're safe. That night, after Emma went to bed, Marshall made 3 phone calls. The first was to his brother Omar Graves, a private investigator who specialized in corporate security. Omar had followed Marshall into the military, but stayed stateside, eventually parlaying his skills into a successful investigation business. I need a full background check on Alex Riley, real estate agent, downtown office. And I need surveillance on my wife. Professional grade, not amateur hour. Jesus, Marsh. What's going on? I'll fill you in tomorrow. How fast can you move on this? Give me 48 hours for the background, 12 hours to set up surveillance. The second call was to his lawyer, Nicholas Gilbert, who handled both business and personal matters for the Ramsey family. Nick, hypothetically, if someone forged my signature to access Emma's trust fund, what would be the legal ramifications? Fraud, identity theft, potentially grand theft, depending on the amounts. We're talking federal charges. Marshall, why? Just covering all my bases. I'll be in touch. The third call was to Glenn McBride. That meeting with Alex Riley? Set up another one. Tell him I'm interested in moving forward with the project, but I want to see the site first. Make it happen fast. Marsh, what the hell is going on? I'll explain later. Right now, I need you to trust me and do exactly what I ask. As Marshall lay in bed beside his sleeping wife, he felt the familiar calm that came before action. In the SEALs, this was the moment when planning transitioned to execution, when all the intelligence, preparation, and strategic thinking crystallized into decisive action. Trisha shifted beside him, murmuring something in her sleep. He studied her profile in the dim light, trying to remember when he'd first noticed the changes. The new jewelry she claimed was costume, but looked expensive. The sudden interest in fitness that required a gym membership across town. The gradual emotional distance that he'd attributed to stress from her business. All of it made sense now. His phone buzzed with a text message. He glanced at the screen, expecting a message from Omar or Glenn. Instead, it was from an unknown number. I know about the recordings. We need to talk. Tomorrow. Alone. Or Emma pays the price. Marshall's blood turned to ice. He looked at Trisha, still apparently asleep beside him. Then he quietly made his way to Emma's room, checking the locks on her windows, ensuring the security system was armed. Someone had just made the gravest mistake of their life. They'd threatened his daughter. Chapter 4. The Art of War. Marshall didn't sleep. Instead, he spent the pre-dawn hours in his study, planning 3 different operational scenarios while monitoring Emma's room through the security cameras he'd installed years ago. At 5:30 a.m., his phone rang. Omar, I've got preliminary information on your boy Alex Riley. Want the good news or the bad news first? Bad news. He's not just a real estate agent. Guy's got a history of targeting wealthy married women. 3 different cities over the past 10 years. Always the same pattern. Affair, financial manipulation, disappearance. And the good news? He's sloppy. Left a paper trail in Portland that suggests he's got gambling debts to some very unfriendly people. The kind who break kneecaps for late payments. Marshall processed this information. How much does he owe? Close to 200 grand, based on what I can piece together. That's probably why he's pushing the timeline with your wife. Speaking of which, did you get surveillance set up? Vans parked 3 blocks from your house with clear sight lines. My guy Tommy's got military experience. He knows how to stay invisible. At 7 a.m., Marshall watched Trisha go through her morning routine, every movement now loaded with new meaning. She was careful not to wake him, tiptoeing around the bedroom as she gathered clothes for what she claimed was a client site visit. Emma appeared in the kitchen just as Trisha was leaving. Mom, can you drive me to school today? Emma asked innocently. Sorry, honey. I have an early appointment. Your dad can take you. Marshall emerged from the hallway. No problem. Ready in 10 minutes, kiddo. Trisha kissed his cheek, a gesture that felt like a betrayal in itself, and headed for the garage. Marshall waited until he heard her car pull away before turning to Emma. Did you get the text I forwarded you last night? Emma nodded grimly. She'd already proven herself capable of handling adult situations, and Marshall had decided to treat her as the operational asset she'd become. I want you to stay with your Uncle Omar today. Colin's sick to school. Dad, I'm not running away from this. You're not running. You're being strategically repositioned while I handle the immediate threat. He handed her a prepaid cell phone. This is for emergencies only. If anything happens, you call this number. He showed her Omar's contact information. If Omar doesn't answer, you call 911. What about you? I'm going to have a conversation with Alex Riley. 20 minutes later, Marshall dropped Emma at Omar's downtown office, a converted warehouse that served as headquarters for Graves investigations. Omar met them at the entrance, his familiar bulk reassuring in the morning light. She's safer here than anywhere else, Omar said, reading Marshall's expression. Tommy's watching the house, Jake's on your wife, and I got 2 guys ready to move if things go sideways. Marshall clasped his brother's shoulder. Thanks. Just don't do anything that'll put you in prison. Emma needs at least one parent who's not a sociopath. At 10 a.m., Marshall walked into Alex Riley's downtown office, a glass-fronted space in a trendy complex that screamed expensive but not profitable. The receptionist, a young woman with perfect teeth and dead eyes, directed him to Alex's private office. Alex was on the phone when Marshall entered, gesturing dramatically while discussing market projections and investment opportunities. He motioned for Marshall to sit while he finished the call. Marshall remained standing. When Alex finally hung up, his smile was as fake as everything else about him. Marshall, great to see you again. Ready to look at that development site? Actually, I want to discuss something else first. Marshall placed a printed screenshot of a text message on the desk. This came from your phone last night. Alex's face went pale as he read his own thread about Emma. I don't know what this is. It's a text message you sent to my phone at 11:47 p.m., threatening my daughter's safety if I didn't meet with you alone. Marshall, I think there's been some kind of misunderstanding. The only misunderstanding is that you thought you could threaten my family and walk away from it. Marshall's voice remained calm, conversational. See, Alex, I know about the affair. I know about the college fund. I know about your gambling debts and your history of targeting wealthy women. Alex stood abruptly, moving toward the door. Marshall's hand shot out, gripping Alex's wrist with just enough pressure to make his point clear. Sit down. Alex sat. Here's what's going to happen, Marshall continued. You're going to call Trisha and tell her the plan has changed. Tell her you need to leave town immediately. Gambling debts, dangerous people, whatever story you want to use. But you're going alone. And if I don't, Marshall smiled for the first time since entering the office. It wasn't a pleasant expression. Alex, I spent 12 years as a Navy SEAL. I know 47 different ways to kill a man with my bare hands, and about half of them look like accidents. Alex's breathing became shallow. You're threatening me. No, I'm explaining your options. Option 1. You disappear from my family's life permanently, and I let you deal with your gambling debts however you see fit. Option 2. I make sure your creditors know exactly where to find you, along with detailed information about your financial situation and current location. You can't. Option 3. Marshall continued as if Alex hadn't spoken, is that I decide you're an ongoing threat to my daughter's safety, and I handle threats permanently. The color drained completely from Alex's face. What's it going to be? Alex's hands shook as he reached for his phone. I'll call her. I'll tell her I have to leave. Speakerphone. Alex dialed Trisha's number with trembling fingers. Marshall listened as his wife's voice filled the office, full of concern and affection for the man who'd helped her betray their family. Alex, what's wrong? You sound upset. Trisha, I have to leave. Tonight, some people from Portland found me, and if I don't get out of town... What people? Alex, you're scaring me. The ones I owe money to. They're not the kind of people who negotiate. There was a long pause. What about our plans? What about Colorado? I can't take you with me. It's too dangerous. Maybe in a few months, when things cool down. Marshall could hear Trisha crying through the phone. The sound should have moved him. This was still the woman he'd loved for 15 years. Instead, he felt only cold satisfaction. "I love you," Trisha whispered. "I love you too," Alex replied, his eyes fixed on Marshall's face. "But I have to go." After the call ended, Marshall stood. "You have 6 hours to be out of the state. If I see you again, if you contact my wife again, if I even hear your name mentioned in this town, I will end you. Do we understand each other?" Alex nodded frantically. "Oh, and Alex, the money you took from my daughter's college fund, you're going to return every penny. I don't have it. I already paid most of it to my creditors." Marshall leaned across the desk, his face inches from Alex's. "Then you better figure out how to get it back. Because if Emma's college fund isn't fully restored by the end of the week, those gambling debts will be the least of your problems." As Marshall walked out of the office, he felt the familiar rush of a mission accomplished. Phase 1 was complete. Now it was time to deal with his wife. Chapter 5, The Reckoning. Marshall returned home to find Trisha sitting at their kitchen table, still in her work clothes, staring at her phone with tears streaming down her face. She looked up as he entered, and for a moment he saw a glimpse of the woman he'd married. Vulnerable, lost, genuinely devastated. Then he remembered the recordings Emma had made, and his sympathy hardened into tactical assessment. "Rough day at work?" he asked, hanging up his keys. Trisha wiped her eyes. Alex had to leave town suddenly. Some kind of family emergency. The lie came so easily that Marshall wondered how many others he'd missed over the years. How many client meetings and work emergencies had actually been something else entirely. That's unfortunate. I hope everything works out for him. "Marshall, can we talk? I mean, really talk." Marshall sat across from her at the table where they'd shared thousands of meals, where Emma had done homework, where they'd planned their life together. "What's on your mind?" I think we need to consider some changes in our marriage." Marshall kept his expression neutral. "What kind of changes?" "I've been thinking about what I want out of life. What makes me happy? And I don't think this," she gestured around the kitchen, "is working anymore. This being our marriage? Marshall, we're different people than we were 15 years ago. We want different things. Maybe it would be better if we took some time apart." The conversation felt surreal. His wife was asking for separation while sitting in the kitchen he'd built for her, surrounded by the life he'd worked 18-hour days to provide, apparently oblivious to the fact that he knew about her affair. What about Emma? She's resilient. Kids adapt. And it's not like we'd be fighting or anything. We could handle this maturely, like adults. Marshall studied Trisha's face, noting the micro-expressions that revealed her true emotional state. The slight elevation of her left eyebrow when she mentioned Emma, a tell that indicated she was lying about something important. The way she touched her wedding ring while talking about separation, a subconscious gesture suggesting guilt. "Have you thought about counseling first? Trying to work through whatever problems we're having?" Trisha's pause lasted just a beat too long. "I don't think counseling would help. Some things can't be fixed, Marshall. Such as, we don't connect anymore. When was the last time we really talked? Really shared something meaningful?" The irony was devastating. They were having the most meaningful conversation of their marriage, and she had no idea. "You're right," Marshall said finally. "We should separate." Surprise flashed across Trisha's face. Apparently she'd expected more resistance. "Really? If that's what you want, then yes. I won't force you to stay in a marriage that makes you unhappy." "What about the house? And Emma's custody?" Marshall had spent hours that morning with Nicholas Gilbert, mapping out the legal landscape. "We'll work out the details. I assume you'll want to move out fairly quickly. Actually, I was thinking maybe you could stay somewhere else for a while, just until we figure things out permanently." Of course, she wanted him out of the house so she could continue her deception more easily, probably hoping Alex would change his mind about leaving town once the coast was clear. "That worked for me. I could stay at Glenn's place for a few weeks." Relief flooded Trisha's features. "Thank you for being so understanding about this. I know it can't be easy." Marshall stood and moved to the window, watching a neighbor walk their dog in the fading afternoon light. "Trisha, can I ask you something?" "Of course." In all the years we've been married, have you ever felt like I didn't support your dreams? Like I held you back somehow? The question caught her off guard. No, Marshall, you've always been supportive. This isn't about anything you did wrong. Then what is it about? A long pause. Sometimes people just grow apart. It's nobody's fault. Marshall turned back to face her. You're right. Sometimes they do. That evening, after Trisha left for what she claimed was a dinner with girlfriends, Marshall packed a suitcase. But instead of going to Glenn's house, he drove to a downtown hotel where Omar had reserved a suite under a false name. Emma was waiting for him in the sitting area, homework spread across the coffee table. How did it go with Alex? She asked without looking up from her math problems. Alex won't be bothering us anymore. And Mom, she asked for separation. Emma's pencil stopped moving. Are you going to give her one? Marshall sat beside his daughter on the couch. Emma, I want you to know that none of this is your fault. And no matter what happens between your mother and me, that will never change how much I love you. I know that, Dad, but that's not what I asked. Marshall smiled despite the circumstances. His daughter's directness was refreshing after hours of Trisha's manipulation and Alex's lies. Yes, I'm going to give her a separation. In fact, I'm going to give her exactly what she wants. Emma looked up from her homework. Why do I get the feeling that's not good news for Mom? Because you're smart enough to understand that sometimes getting what you want isn't the same as getting what you need. Over the next 3 days, Marshall orchestrated his apparent departure from the family home with military precision. He made a show of moving clothes and personal items to Glenn's house, complained to mutual friends about Trisha's sudden desire for space, and played the role of the confused, hurt husband perfectly. Meanwhile, Omar's surveillance team documented every move Trisha made. She contacted Alex 17 times in the first 2 days, growing increasingly frantic when he didn't respond. She drove past his office building 4 times. She even called the hospital to ask if anyone named Alex Riley had been admitted. On the 3rd day, she did something that confirmed Marshall's worst suspicions about her character. She went to Emma's school and checked her out early, claiming a family emergency. Then she drove to the bank. Omar's man Tommy followed them inside and watched from a distance as Trisha attempted to access Emma's trust fund. The account required 2 signatures, Marshall's and Trisha's, but Tommy observed her practicing Marshall's signature on a piece of scrap paper. She was planning to forge his name. Tommy's earpiece crackled with Omar's voice. She's going to try it. Get pictures of everything. But Emma, sitting beside her mother at the bank manager's desk, spoke up in a clear, carrying voice. Mom, didn't Dad say we needed to wait until he got back from his business trip before we did anything with my college money? The bank manager looked confused. I thought you said your husband was aware of this transaction, Mrs. Ramsey. Trisha's face flushed. He is. Emma's just confused about the timeline. Actually, Emma continued innocently, I'm pretty sure Dad said not to touch my trust fund without him being here. Maybe we should wait. The bank manager was now clearly uncomfortable. Mrs. Ramsey, given the amount involved and the requirement for dual signatures, I think it would be best if your husband were present for this transaction. Trisha gathered her purse with barely controlled frustration. Fine. We'll come back when he's available. As they left the bank, Tommy captured audio of Trisha angrily scolding Emma in the parking lot. Why did you say that? I'm your mother. You're supposed to trust me. Emma's response was barely audible, but devastating. Maybe if you told the truth more often, it would be easier to trust you. That evening, Marshall received Omar's full report along with photos and audio recordings. His 12-year-old daughter had single-handedly prevented a felony from being committed, while simultaneously exposing her mother's true intentions for the world to see. As he reviewed the evidence, Marshall felt a cold satisfaction settle in his chest. Trisha had made her choice. She'd chosen betrayal over loyalty, deception over honesty, selfishness over family. Now, she was going to learn the price of that choice. It was time for Phase 2. Chapter 6. The Trap is Set. Marshall spent the weekend at Omar's warehouse, planning the next phase of his operation with the precision of a military campaign. The space served as an informal war room, with surveillance photos, financial documents, and legal papers spread across a large conference table. She's getting desperate, Omar reported, pointing to time-stamped photographs. Since Alex disappeared, she's been driving past his apartment complex twice a day. Yesterday, she tried to get his forwarding address from the building manager. What about the college fund? According to Nick Gilbert, she's called the bank 3 times asking about expediting the signature process for Emma's account. They keep telling her both parents need to be present. Marshall studied a photograph of Tricia sitting in her car outside Alex's apartment building. Phone pressed to her ear with an expression of barely controlled panic. She's going to make a mistake soon. Desperate people always do. Emma looked up from her laptop, where she'd been working on what appeared to be homework, but was actually helping Omar compile a digital dossier on Alex Riley's previous victims. Dad, I found something interesting. She turned the screen toward him. Alex Riley isn't his real name. His birth name is Alexander Reed. And look at this. She pulled up a newspaper article from Portland. 2 years ago, a woman named Susan Martinez accused him of stealing $50,000 from her late husband's estate. The charges were dropped when she suddenly stopped cooperating with police. Probably paid her off or threatened her, Omar muttered. Or both, Marshall added. What else did you find? Emma navigated to another browser tab. 6 months before that, he was involved in a civil suit with Rebecca Chun in Seattle. Same pattern. Older, wealthy woman, mysterious financial losses. Case dismissed when the plaintiff withdrew her complaint. Marshall felt a surge of pride watching his daughter work. Emma had inherited his analytical mind and attention to detail, but she'd also developed an intuitive understanding of human nature that went beyond her years. There's something else, Emma continued. I cross-referenced the dates of Alex's previous relocations with Mom's credit card statements from the past year. She pulled up a spreadsheet that showed a timeline of Tricia's spending patterns. Look at this. Last February, right after Alex supposedly moved here from Portland, Mom started getting cash advances on her credit cards. Small amounts at first, but they've been increasing. Omar leaned over to examine the data. She's been giving him money. How much? Marshall asked. Emma clicked to a summary tab. $43,000 over the past 10 months. All cash advances, all from different ATMs around the city. The picture was becoming clearer. Alex had identified Tricia as a mark, cultivated the relationship over months, slowly extracted money through the affair, and then escalated to targeting Emma's college fund when Tricia's available credit ran out. Dad, Emma said quietly, there's something else. I checked Mom's browser history on the home computer. Marshall waited. She's been researching divorce law, specifically how assets are divided in California and what rights she'd have to my trust fund if you died. The words hit Marshall like a physical blow. What do you mean if I died? Emma pulled up a series of screenshots. She's been visiting websites about life insurance policies, accidental death benefits, and something called wrongful death settlements. She spent 3 hours last week reading about workplace accidents in the construction industry. Omar and Marshall exchanged glances. The conversation Alex and Tricia had recorded about creating leverage through a little accident suddenly took on a much more sinister meaning. Emma, I want you to print all of this and give it to Nick Gilbert. This is evidence of conspiracy. Already done. I also made backup copies and store them in 3 different cloud accounts. Marshall looked at his daughter with a mixture of awe and sadness. At 12 years old, she was already thinking like a seasoned intelligence operative, protecting evidence and covering operational security. But she should have been worried about middle school drama and homework, not her mother's potential involvement in a murder plot. There's one more thing, Emma said hesitantly. I don't think Mom knows that Alex is really gone. I think she thinks he's just hiding from the gambling people, and that he'll come back for her eventually. Why do you say that? Because she's still acting like someone who has a future plan. She's not acting like someone whose boyfriend just abandoned her. She's acting like someone who's waiting. Marshall considered this. Emma was right. Tricia's behavior suggested she believed Alex would return, which meant she didn't understand that Marshall had discovered their affair and driven Alex away permanently. That gives us an advantage, Marshall said finally. She'll keep following the original plan, thinking Alex is going to reappear at some point. What was the original plan? Omar asked. Marshall pulled out transcripts of the phone conversations Emma had recorded. Based on the recordings, they were planning to drain Emma's trust fund, stage some kind of accident that would make me more cooperative, and then disappear together to Colorado. Jesus. And she thinks this is still happening. As far as she knows, Alex just had to leave town temporarily because of gambling debts. She's probably expecting him to contact her any day with new instructions. Emma closed her laptop. So what do we do? Marshall stood and walked to the window overlooking the city. Below, people were going about their normal lives, working, shopping, spending time with families they could trust. The contrast with his own situation was almost overwhelming. We're going to give her exactly what she wants, he said finally. We're going to let her think the plan is working. Ow! Marshall turned back to face them. Emma, how would you feel about going on a camping trip with your old man? Somewhere remote, somewhere cell phone reception might be spotty. Understanding dawned in Emma's eyes. You want her to think something happened to you. Not something fatal, but something that would explain why I'm not available to sign bank documents or ask inconvenient questions. Omar grinned. A hunting accident, maybe? Something that lands you in a hospital outside the area? Exactly. And while I'm supposedly unconscious in some remote medical facility, Trisha will have the opportunity to show us exactly how far she's willing to go to get what she wants. Emma was quiet for a long moment. Dad, what if she tries to do something to me while you're gone? Marshall knelt beside his daughter's chair. Emma, I would never put you in real danger. Omar's going to be watching you every second, and we'll have backup plans for every possible scenario. But more importantly, I don't think she'll hurt you. You're worth more to her alive than dead. You're the key to the trust fund. Besides, Omar added, your mom doesn't know that you're aware of what's going on. As far as she's concerned, you're still just a 12-year-old kid who doesn't understand adult problems. Emma smiled for the first time in days. She has no idea how much trouble she's in, does she? Marshall returned his daughter's smile. None whatsoever. As they finalized the details of their plan, Marshall felt the familiar calm that came before decisive action. Trisha had made her choice when she betrayed their family. Alex had made his choice when he threatened Emma's safety. Now, they were going to learn that Marshall Ramsey was not a man who forgave betrayal. And he never forgot. Chapter 7. Into the Woods. Monday morning arrived with the crisp clarity of autumn in Northern California. Marshall made his final preparations while Trisha went through her morning routine, unaware that her husband was orchestrating the endgame of their marriage. Emma played her part perfectly at breakfast, chattering about school projects and weekend plans while secretly coordinating with Omar through hand signals they'd practiced. She'd proven herself remarkably adaptable to operational requirements, a skill that would serve her well in the coming days. Dad, can we go camping this weekend? Emma asked as Trisha gathered her purse and work materials. I haven't been to the mountains in forever. That sounds like a great idea, Marshall replied. It's been too long since we had some father-daughter time. Trisha looked up from her phone. Camping? This weekend, just overnight. There's a site up near Lake Tahoe that Emma's been wanting to see. It seems kind of sudden. Marshall shrugged. We both need a break from all the stress lately. Some time in nature might do us good. Emma nodded enthusiastically. Please, Mom. We'll be back Sunday evening. Trisha's expression was conflicted. On one hand, having Marshall and Emma out of town would give her more freedom to contact Alex or handle financial matters. On the other hand, the timing felt coincidental given her recent bank visit. I suppose it would be good for you two to spend time together, she said finally. After Trisha left for work, Marshall made a phone call to Nicholas Gilbert. Nick, I need you to do something for me. Call Trisha this afternoon and tell her you need to meet about updating my life insurance policy. Make it sound routine, but mention that the payout has increased substantially since my business has grown. Marshall, what are you planning? Just reinforcing some information she might find interesting. Can you do it? Yeah, but I'm getting worried about where this is all heading. Trust me, Nick. Everything I'm doing is completely legal. That wasn't entirely true, but Nick didn't need to know about the more aggressive aspects of Marshall's plan. At 3 p.m., Marshall and Emma loaded camping gear in his truck while Omar's surveillance team documented every move from their concealed positions. To any observer, they looked like a father and daughter heading out for a weekend adventure. The reality was significantly more complex. They drove north toward the mountains, but instead of heading to Lake Tahoe, Marshall took a series of back roads that led to an abandoned mining camp Omar had scouted earlier. The location was perfect, remote enough to be believable, but close enough to civilization for rapid extraction if needed. Once they reached the camp, Marshall set up their legitimate camping equipment, while Emma established communication protocols with Omar using satellite phones that couldn't be traced through normal cellular networks. Phase 1 begins at 1800 hours, Marshall said, checking his watch. That gives Trisha time to get home and start wondering why we're not answering our phones. At exactly 6 p.m., Emma placed a call to Trisha's cell phone using a prepaid phone that couldn't be traced to either of them. "Mom? It's Emma. Something happened." Trisha's voice was immediately panicked. "Emma, what's wrong? Where are you?" "We're at the camping site, but Dad had an accident. He was setting up our tent near this cliff, and some rocks gave way." "Oh my God, is he hurt?" Emma's performance was Oscar-worthy. Her voice shook with exactly the right amount of fear and uncertainty. "He fell about 15 feet. He's unconscious, and I can't wake him up. There's blood. Emma, call 911 right now." "I tried, but my phone doesn't have any signal up here. I had to hike to a high spot just to call you." "Where exactly are you?" "I'll call for help." Emma provided coordinates that would lead search teams to the abandoned mining camp, where they would find evidence of an accident, but no actual victims. "Mom, I'm scared. Dad's breathing, but he won't wake up, and I don't know what to do." "Baby, listen to me. I'm going to call 911 and the sheriff's department. They'll send a helicopter to get you both. Just stay with your father and keep him warm, okay?" "Okay. But Mom, what if?" "Don't think like that. Your father is strong. He's going to be fine." After Emma ended the call, Marshall felt a complex mix of emotions. Trisha's panic and concern had sounded genuine, and for a moment, he wondered if he'd misjudged the depth of her betrayal. Then Emma showed him a text message that had arrived on her regular phone during the call. It was from Trisha, sent just 3 minutes after their conversation ended. "Emergency at home. Can't pick you up today. Take the bus." "Mom." The text was intended for Alex, sent to the number she'd been using to contact him for months. Even in the midst of a family crisis, Trisha's first instinct was to reach out to her lover. Marshall's momentary doubt evaporated. 20 minutes later, Emma's satellite phone buzzed with an encrypted message from Omar. "Mountain rescue deployed. Sheriff's helicopter en route to coordinates. Trisha left house immediately after your call, heading toward bank." The trap was working perfectly. While search and rescue teams combed the mountains looking for victims who weren't there, Trisha was racing around town trying to access funds that would soon be frozen by court order. Nick Gilbert had already filed emergency paperwork citing suspicious financial activity and potential fraud, but the legal wheels wouldn't start turning until morning. That gave Trisha exactly one night to reveal her true intentions. At 10 p.m., Emma's regular phone received another call from Trisha. "Emma? Thank God. I've been calling for hours. Are you okay? Where's your father?" Emma's voice was perfectly calibrated to convey exhaustion and trauma. "They airlifted Dad to a hospital in Carson City. The doctors won't tell me anything because I'm not 18. I'm driving there right now." "What hospital?" Emma provided the name of a medical facility that Omar had confirmed would have no record of Marshall's admission. "Mom, they said Dad has a serious head injury. They don't know when he'll wake up." "Oh, baby, I'm so sorry. This is all my fault for letting you go on this trip." "It's not your fault, Mom. It was just an accident." "Emma, listen carefully. I need you to come home with me tonight. We'll drive back to the hospital together in the morning." "But what if Dad wakes up and I'm not here?" "The doctors will call us. Right now, you need rest and a proper meal. You've been through enough." Emma agreed to meet Trisha at the hospital, knowing that Omar's team would intercept them before any actual contact occurred. But the conversation had provided crucial intelligence about Trisha's state of mind. She wasn't rushing to her husband's bedside out of love and concern. She was consolidating assets and preparing for the next phase of her plan. As Marshall and Emma settled into their remote camp for the night, both of them listening to regular updates from Omar's surveillance team, Marshall reflected on how completely his life had changed in just 1 week. 7 days ago, he'd been a successful businessman with a loving family and a bright future. Tonight, he was a man hiding in the wilderness, gathering evidence of his wife's betrayal while his 12-year-old daughter demonstrated tactical skills that would impress seasoned operators. But he felt no regret about the path he'd chosen. Trisha had started this war when she decided to betray their family. Now she was going to discover that Marshall Ramsey always finished what others started, and he never lost. Chapter 8. The Net Closes. Tuesday morning brought news that confirmed Marshall's worst suspicions about his wife's character. Omar's voice crackled through the satellite phone at 6 a.m. "You're not going to believe what she did last night." Marshall and Emma were already breaking camp, preparing for the next phase of their operation. They'd slept in shifts, monitoring communications and ensuring their fictional scenario remained believable to outside observers. "Tell me, after she couldn't find you at the Carson City Hospital, she drove straight home and started packing. Not just clothes, everything valuable. Jewelry, artwork, important documents. Then she made 3 phone calls." Marshall felt his jaw tighten. To who? First call was to a storage facility, reserving a unit under a false name. Second call was to that lawyer Jackie Wall recommended last month, the one who specializes in emergency asset protection. Third call. Omar paused. Third call was to a private medical transport service, asking about the cost of moving an unconscious patient from Carson City to a more specialized facility. Emma looked up from her satellite phone, where she'd been monitoring news reports about the search and rescue operation. She's planning to move Dad somewhere she can control access to him. That's not the worst part, Omar continued. After the phone calls, she drove to 3 different ATMs and maxed out cash advances on every credit card she has access to. Then she went to that 24-hour check cashing place on 5th Street. Marshall's blood ran cold. What was she cashing? That's what Tommy's trying to figure out. But based on the amount of time she spent inside, it wasn't just one check. The implications were staggering. In the span of 12 hours, Trisha had gone from concerned wife to someone systematically liquidating assets and making arrangements to potentially move her unconscious husband to a location where she could control medical decisions. "Omar, I need you to contact Nick Gilbert immediately. Tell him to file for emergency conservatorship and to freeze all joint accounts. Do it now before the banks open." Already on it. Nick's been at his office since 5 a.m. preparing paperwork. Emma finished packing her gear and looked at her father with an expression far too mature for her 12 years. "Dad, she's not planning to wait for you to wake up, is she?" Marshall considered sugarcoating the truth, but Emma had already proven herself capable of handling adult realities. "No, kiddo, I don't think she is." The satellite phone buzzed with an incoming text from Omar. "Mountain Rescue officially called off search at dawn. Presuming you fell into river, bodies swept downstream. Local news picking up story." Perfect. The fictional accident was now public record, which meant Trisha would have legal justification for any emergency financial decisions she might make. She probably thought she had a narrow window of opportunity before Marshall's body was recovered and death certificates were issued. She had no idea that window was actually a trap. At 9 a.m., Marshall and Emma were hidden in the back of Omar's surveillance van, watching live video feeds from cameras positioned around their house. They watched Trisha return home with 2 men Marshall didn't recognize, both wearing cheap suits and carrying briefcases. "Who are they?" Emma asked. Omar consulted his tablet. "Guy on the left is David Chun, private lawyer who specializes in questionable estate planning. Guy on the right is Marcus Webb, insurance adjuster who's been suspended twice for fraudulent claims processing." Marshall felt his anger crystallize into something cold and sharp. Trisha hadn't just betrayed their marriage. She'd assembled a team of professionals to help her steal Emma's inheritance. They watched as Trisha led the 2 men into Marshall's home office, where they began photographing documents and organizing papers into different stacks. One stack appeared to be insurance policies. Another looked like bank statements and investment records. The third stack was Emma's trust fund documentation. "Dad," Emma said quietly, "are we going to let them take everything?" Marshall's smile was predatory. "Emma, do you remember the first rule of military strategy? Know your enemy better than they know themselves. And the second rule? Never interrupt your enemy when they're making a mistake. Emma grinned. So we're going to let them think they're winning? We're going to let them hang themselves with their own rope. Over the next 6 hours, Omar's surveillance team documented every illegal action taken by Tricia and her associates. They recorded conversations about forging Marshall's signature on insurance documents. They photographed Chun helping Tricia practice Marshall's handwriting. They captured Webb on audio explaining how to maximize payouts from accidental death policies. Most damning of all, they recorded Tricia's phone call to the medical transport service. I need to arrange immediate transfer of a patient from Carson City General to a private facility. The patient is unconscious, and I have medical power of attorney. She was planning to have Marshall moved to a location where she could control access to him, potentially until she'd completed her financial manipulations. At 3 p.m., the trap was sprung. Nicholas Gilbert arrived at the house with a sheriff's deputy and a court order freezing all Ramsey family assets, pending investigation of suspected fraud. Omar's surveillance footage had provided sufficient evidence for a judge to issue emergency protective measures. Marshall and Emma watched from the van as Tricia's carefully orchestrated plan collapsed in real time. The lawyer Chin attempted to destroy documents, but was stopped by the deputy. Webb tried to leave through the back door, but found his car blocked by another police vehicle. Tricia herself stood in the middle of her kitchen, the kitchen Marshall had renovated as a gift, and screamed at Nick Gilbert about harassment and illegal search procedures. Mrs. Ramsey, Nick said calmly, "You're welcome to contact your own attorney. But these accounts remain frozen until we can verify the legitimacy of your recent financial activities. My husband is missing, possibly dead. I have every right to protect my family's assets." Actually, you don't. California law requires a waiting period before death can be legally presumed, and it certainly doesn't authorize forgery or insurance fraud. Tricia's face went white. "I don't know what you're talking about." Nick opened his briefcase and pulled out printed screenshots of the surveillance footage. "Mrs. Ramsey, we have video evidence of you practicing your husband's signature and audio recordings of you discussing fraudulent insurance claims. I strongly recommend you contact a criminal defense attorney." As the sheriff's deputy began reading Tricia her rights, Marshall felt a complex mix of satisfaction and sadness. This was the woman he'd loved for 15 years, the mother of his child, his partner in building a life together. She was also someone who'd been willing to steal from her own daughter and potentially manipulate her husband's medical care for financial gain. Emma touched his arm. "Dad, are you okay?" Marshall looked at his daughter, strong, loyal, intelligent beyond her years, and realized that while he was losing a wife, he was gaining something even more valuable: absolute certainty about who could be trusted. "I'm fine, kiddo. Better than fine, actually. What happens now?" Marshall watched as Tricia was handcuffed and led toward a police car, her carefully constructed plan in ruins around her. Now we finish this. The final phase of Marshall's operation was about to begin, and this time, there would be no escape route for anyone who betrayed his family. Chapter 9. Justice Served. 3 weeks later, Marshall sat in Nicholas Gilbert's office reviewing the final documents that would reshape his family's future. Emma was beside him, no longer the innocent 12-year-old who discovered her mother's betrayal, but a young woman who'd proven herself worthy of his complete trust. "The criminal charges are solid," Nick reported. "Fraud, forgery, attempted grand theft, conspiracy to commit insurance fraud. With the evidence Omar collected, Tricia's looking at minimum 5 years, possibly 8 if they can prove the medical transport scheme was intended to facilitate harm." Marshall nodded without emotion. "And the divorce?" "Expedited due to criminal activity. California has provisions for accelerated proceedings when one spouse commits felonies against the family unit. She gets nothing. No alimony, no property division, no custody rights." Emma looked up from her phone, where she'd been tracking the status of Alex Riley's situation. "Dad, Alex was arrested in Nevada yesterday. Apparently those gambling debts caught up with him." Marshall had ensured that information about Alex's location and assets reached the right people at exactly the right time. The 2 men who'd come looking for Alex were not known for their patience with defaulted loans. "What about the money they took?" Emma asked. Nick consulted his notes. Alex managed to return about 60% before his unfortunate encounter with his creditors. The rest will come from the sale of Trisha's personal assets, jewelry, car, everything she tried to hide in that storage unit. So Emma's college fund will be fully restored. With interest, actually, the court ordered punitive damages that more than compensate for the emotional distress caused. Marshall felt a deep satisfaction at this news. Emma's future had been the primary target of Trisha's betrayal, and seeing it not just restored but enhanced felt like justice properly served. There's one more thing, Nick added hesitantly. Trisha's lawyer contacted me yesterday. She wants to meet with you. Something about making amends. Absolutely not, Emma said before Marshall could respond. She had her chance to make amends. She chose Alex instead. Marshall studied his daughter's face, seeing the steel that had emerged over the past month. Emma had lost her innocence, but she'd gained something more valuable, the knowledge that she could handle whatever life threw at her. What do you think, kiddo? Should I hear what she has to say? Emma considered this carefully. Dad, you taught me that when someone shows you who they really are, you should believe them. Mom showed us exactly who she is. Meeting with her now just gives her another opportunity to manipulate the situation. Marshall felt a surge of pride. At 12 years old, Emma understood strategic thinking better than most adults. You're right. Nick, tell her lawyer the answer is no. We have nothing to discuss. As they left Nick's office, Emma was unusually quiet. Finally, as they reached Marshall's truck, she spoke. Dad, do you think she ever really loved us? The question hit Marshall harder than any of Trisha's betrayals. I think she loved the idea of us. The security, the lifestyle, the image of being a successful family. But real love, the kind that puts other people before yourself, I don't think she's capable of that. I'm sorry. For what? For recording her phone calls. For spying on my own mother. For helping you trick her. Marshall stopped walking and turned to face his daughter. Emma, look at me. You have nothing to apologize for. What you did wasn't spying, it was protecting your family. You saw a threat, you gathered intelligence, and you reported it to the appropriate authority. That's exactly what you should have done. But she's still my mom. Yes, she is. And that makes what she did even worse, not better. Parents are supposed to protect their children, not steal from them. Emma nodded. But Marshall could see she was still struggling with the complex emotions of having helped bring down her own mother. Kiddo, let me ask you something. If you had to do it all over again, knowing what you know now, would you change anything? Emma thought for a long moment. No, I'd do exactly the same thing. Because protecting you and protecting my future was more important than protecting her lies. Marshall felt his chest tighten with emotion. His daughter had faced an impossible choice and made the right decision, even though it cost her the comfortable illusion of a happy family. I'm proud of you, he said simply, as they drove home to the house that was now truly theirs, free from deception and betrayal. Emma asked one final question. Dad, what if she gets out of prison and tries to contact me? Marshall's expression hardened. That won't happen. How can you be sure? Because part of her plea agreement includes a permanent restraining order. She's legally prohibited from contacting either of us for the rest of her life. If she tries, she goes back to prison. And Alex won't be bothering anyone for a very long time. His creditors were thorough in their collection efforts. Emma didn't ask for details, and Marshall didn't offer them. Some aspects of justice were better left unexamined. That evening, as Emma worked on homework at the kitchen table and Marshall prepared dinner, the house felt peaceful in a way it hadn't in months. The constant undercurrent of tension and deception was gone, replaced by the comfortable quiet of two people who trusted each other completely. Dad, Emma said without looking up from her math problems. Yeah, I know this has been hard for you. Losing Mom, are you going to be okay? Marshall smiled as he watched his daughter, brilliant, loyal, strong, bent over her homework in the kitchen he'd built for a woman who'd never deserved it. Emma, I didn't lose anything important. I found out what was really valuable, which is you, your trust, your loyalty, your courage. Everything else was just illusion. Emma looked up and smiled. So what do we do now? Marshall considered the question. They had their house, their business, their future secured. They had each other, tested, and proven. They had justice properly served. Most importantly, they had the knowledge that they'd faced betrayal and emerged stronger. Now we live our lives, Marshall said. We build something real, something honest, something that can't be destroyed by other people's selfishness. Just the two of us. For now. But Emma, someday you'll find people worthy of your trust. Real friends, maybe even someone special. And when you do, you'll know how to recognize the difference between genuine loyalty and pretty lies. Emma nodded and returned to her homework. Marshall finished preparing dinner, feeling a contentment he hadn't experienced in years. Outside, night was falling on Northern California. Somewhere, Tricia was beginning her prison sentence, learning the hard way that actions have consequences. Somewhere else, Alex was discovering that betraying the wrong person could have permanent ramifications. But in the kitchen of the house Marshall had built with his own hands, father and daughter shared a quiet meal, secure in the knowledge that they'd protected what truly mattered. Some betrayals destroyed families. This one had forged something unbreakable. Marshall Ramsey had taught his enemies the most important lesson of his military career. Never underestimate a man protecting his family. And never forget that some battles end only when the enemy can never fight again. The war was over. Marshall had won. And there you have it. Another story comes to an end. What did you think? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoy this story, consider joining our community by subscribing. It means the world to us. For more stories like this one, check out the recommended videos on screen. And I'll see you there.